In domain 4, design a strategy for data and applications of the exam SC-100, the Microsoft Cybersecurity Architect, you learn how to secure applications, APIs, and the development process using techniques like posture management, threat modeling, and secure access for workload and identities. You will also learn about designing solutions that secure an organization's data using capabilities like Microsoft Purview, Defender for SQL, Defender for Storage, etc. Hi, my name is Seolito Rodriguez, and in this fourth section of the review questions for the exam XC100, we will cover the designing a strategy for data and applications. As we have mentioned before, this exam covers 5 domains, 5 big objectives. So we are in the fourth one at this point. After this, the final one will be the domain 5, recommend security best practices and priorities. Question 1. You are designing identity security for an application. You need to allow access to other organizations using their identity systems. What should you use? Azure AD B2B allows you to connect with other organizations and use their identity systems to configure authentication for your application. Question 2. You are designing a data security strategy for Azure virtual machines. You need to ensure that data at rest is encrypted with a key stored in a hardware security module. You must be able to rotate keys when necessary. What should you do? A, enable Azure disk encryption with customer managed keys, and D, deploy an Azure Key Vault in the premium tier. VMs can use Azure disk encryption with customer managed keys for encrypting data at rest. Those keys can be stored in an HSM in the premium tier of Azure Key Vault. Question 3. You are designing identity for an application. You need to analyze and mitigate security issues for the application. What should you use? Microsoft Threat Modeling tool helps you design an application, analyze threats, and mitigate any identified security issues. Question 4. The blank has documented a threat modeling approach for web applications. The Open Web Application Security Project, or OWASP, has documented a threat modeling approach for web applications. Question 5. Drag the Azure service type on the left to the correct data security action on the right. App service, request encryption for client connection requests. Database, require transparent data encryption to be enabled. A storage account, use Azure Storage Service Encryption for data at rest. You need to identify information that might be stored in documents that contain employee IDs. The solution informs the data loss prevention policies. What should you create? We kind of caught the question on the previous slide over there. So you need to identify information that might be stored in documents that contain employee IDs. The solution must include using existing data to inform the data loss prevention policy. What should you create? And you should create a sensitive information types and exact data match. A sensitive information type with exact data match can use existing data to train the DLP policies. Blank is a region-based service that can be deployed in front of a web application to provide load balancing and web application firewall or WAF capabilities. Azure Application Gateway provides load balancing and WAF services at a regional level. Question 8. Place the phases of the DevOps lifecycle in the correct sequence. The 4 phases of the DevOps lifecycle are, in this order: plan 1, develop 2, deliver 3, and operate 4. Question 9. You are creating data loss prevention policies for your organization. Which 2 components should you include in a policy? A policy can include sensitive information types, sensitivity labels, retention labels, and trainable classifiers. Question number 10. Your organization uses a third-party cloud application. You need to ensure that authentication sessions are routed through Azure AD. What should you use? Conditional access app control allows you to force authentication through Azure AD conditional access before accessing the third-party app. So here's an example where that would be. So when you go to the conditional access in Azure AD, if you go to the control select, well, actually it's even below that. It's a little bit carved over there. But when you go to the sessions, right, you can basically choose the use a conditional access app control. And basically, this is how it works. So you have application, let's say Exchange Online, right? Outlook, so you have corporate devices and you may have personal devices if you use the bring your own device BYOD policies, right? So you have a conditional access, basically meaning, okay, yes, you can access this app, but depending on where you come from, you need to satisfy, certain conditions, right? So there's certain control, and this is where the conditional access comes in. So you will be either allowed or blocked depending on whether you satisfy the conditions or not. Or you may be allowed, but it is a requirement that you use MFA, otherwise you will be blocked, right? And all of this is happening in real time. So kind of Microsoft uses, kind of like a reverse proxy in which when, you go to Outlook, right? Because you need to go to any of this endpoints from Microsoft. So you kind of go to this endpoints where Microsoft will check the conditions, and there's a number of things, right? It could be where are you coming from? Are you coming from, again, a personal device or a trusted device? Are you coming from the United States or from another country? Are you coming from an IP address that is trusted on the Microsoft platform, right? Or are you coming from a Windows PC or a Mac PC? Or are you coming from an iPhone or an Android device? I mean, there's a gazillion things that Microsoft can check in real time to decide whether you can be allowed or not. Question 11. Your organization uses Azure Data Lake, Azure Files, and Azure SQL database. You need to identify sensitivity data content. What should you use? A. Rights Management Connector. B. Defender for Cloud. C. Microsoft Purview Data Map. Or D. Microsoft Sentinel. And the correct answer here is the Microsoft Purview Data Map. So the Microsoft Purview Data Map can identify sensitive information and automatically apply labeling to that information. Question 12. Drag each stride category on the left to the correct definition on the right. So the answer is as follow. So accessing and using another user authentication, it's a spoofing. Maliciously modifying data, that's tampering. Performing an action without a way to trace it, that's repudiation. Exposing information to users who do not have proper authorization is information disclosure. Denying availability to valid users, that's denial of service, and escalating permissions to a higher level than they should be for the user is elevation of privilege. So, and this is what, if you look at the first letter of this, this is what this stride is all about. So again, a spoofing, all right, that's S. Tampering, that's T, stride. Repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and the elevation of privilege. So that's what the stride actually stand for, and it's a modeling that Microsoft uses for identifying risks. Question 36. You deploy an application to an Azure App Service. You need to mitigate the threat of SQL injection on the app. What should you do? A. Deploy an Azure Application Gateway. Deploy an Azure Firewall. C. Configure a private endpoint on the app service. Or D. Enable TLS on the app service. And the correct answer is A. Deploy an Azure Application Gateway. Question 14. Your organization uses third-party apps and services that store sensitive data. You need to identify and apply sensitivity labels to the data stored in these services. What should you use? A. Defender for Cloud. B. Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. C. Microsoft Information Protection SDK or Microsoft Sentinel. And the correct answer is Microsoft Information Protection SDK. The Microsoft Information Protection SDK allows you to extend sensitivity labels to third-party apps and services. Question 15. Which security methodology limits the damage that a single account can do? A. Defense in depth. B. Escalation of privilege. C. Principle of least privilege. Or D. Repudiation. And the correct answer is the principle of least privilege. The principle of least privilege limits the damage that a single account can do in an environment. Question 16. You are designing a data security strategy for Azure SQL database. Which two actions should you include? A. ensure that Azure disk encryption uses keys from the Azure Key Vault. B, ensure that dynamic data masking is configured for users. C, ensure that service fabric secrets are stored in a managed hardware security module or HSM. Or D, ensure that transparent data encryption TDE is enabled. And the correct answer is B, R, B, ensure that dynamic data masking is configured for users, and D, ensure that transparent data encryption or TDE is enabled. Question 17. Drag the data classification capability on the left to the correct definition on the right. And the definitions items are policies, trainable classifiers, sensitive information type, and data classification. So the correct answer, sensitive information type, uses a built-in or customized regular expression with keywords, confidence levels, and proximity. Trainable classifiers uses pattern matching to identify possible sensitive data. Data classification, items that have been identified with an appropriate sensitivity label, and policies that define behavior after data has been classified with a sensitivity label. Question 39. Blank is a global service that can be deployed in front of web applications to provide load balancing and web application firewall or WAF capabilities. And the correct answer is Azure Front Door. Azure Front Door provides load balancing and WAF services at a global level. Question 19. You are designing identity security for an application. You need to allow external access for users within the company. What should you use? Azure AD B2B, Azure AD B2C, managed identities, or third-party services. And so the question was basically, you are designing security for an application. You need to allow external access for use with their personal Microsoft account. What should you use? And in that case, you need to use the Azure AD B2C, which is the business to consumer, which allows you to connect with external users via their personal accounts, including Microsoft accounts. So basically means that you could allow like a retailer, you could allow people to connect with their Facebook account or the Hotmail account or Gmail or whatever. So all of that is possible. Question 20. You need to identify information using examples of data that might be sensitive instead of using pattern matching. So what should you use? A custom sensitivity information type, a trainable classifier, C, a sensitivity label, and D, a retention label. And the correct answer is a trainable classifier. And again, the question says you need to identify information using examples of data that might be sensitive instead of using pattern matching, right? And so you can use a trainable classifier with sample data rather than using pattern matching to identify sensitive information. 21. Which method provides a secure access strategy with auditing for Azure SQL database? And the correct answer is A, authenticate using a managed identity. So authenticating with an identity provides a secure access with a managed identity, right? Secure access and an audit trail for the identity. And finally, this is just a tutorial about managed identities. And finally, number 22, um, For this objective, you need to identify information that might be stored in documents that contain employee IDs. What should you create? A custom sensitivity information type. B, a trainable classifier. C, a sensitivity label. Or D, a retention label. And the correct answer is a custom sensitivity sensitive information type. A custom sensitive information type allows you to identify data based on a pattern and confidence level that you set. All right, so that was the end of that objective. In the next video, we will cover the final objective 5 for the practice question for this exam.